to share a little bit in the data and analytics domain, specifically with the team. I'm responsible for the data analytics value proposition with Innovations, and just for the past 20 years or so, have a real deep passion for helping customers tell the stories within their data. And I think from previous knowledge shares and maybe some white papers, there's exciting movement in this domain and space. And it basically boils down to delivering insights and answers at the speed of business for, in my opinion, the first time ever. And there's a couple of reasons for that, but yeah, as a quick intro, Elisha, that's me, value prop lead for data analytics, and really excited to share some of the bleeding edge approaches and methodologies and technology, specifically around the data mesh with the team today. Elisha, if you're ready, then I can jump straight in under your guidance.
Yeah, shoot.
Awesome. I'm going to turn the video off, and just to double check, everyone can see the starting slide, right? That says the data mesh.
Got it.
Awesome. All right. Elisha, if I can ask you, help me if there's hands that goes up during the session. I know there's half an hour presentation and then half an hour questions and answers. So we'll roughly follow that format, but I love, questions at that point in time. Sometimes you miss a bit of those really good questions or interaction if you just try and get through the presentation. So if at any point there's something you want to ask, or recent conversation around data that you had that relates to some of these concepts that we'll go through today, then let's do that. I'll prefer that than to get through the presentation and then afterwards just focus on questions and answers. So please feel free to do that. I see some people are still joining, but I'm going to jump straight in. So there's a new buzzword, as we see all over in all kinds of different domains. It's called the data mesh. It's fairly new. I think some serious talk or initial talk started in, let's say, beginning of 2020. Then there was a bit of let's say, a year of this baking and maturing. And then it really started getting traction, let's say, really from October last year, internationally, in terms of the data mesh. So just a rough structure that we'll follow today, or agenda. A quick introduction in terms of data mesh, what it is at a high level, then how it compares to some traditional ways of doing things, and then we're going to dive straight into, and again, I like when things gets practical. It's not just airy-fairy, so a little bit in terms of the practical side of implementing a data mesh, the architecture techniques, principles, and even some of the challenges that's coming out of companies that are running with this, and then sharing in webinars the challenges they're experiencing. And then we'll end up and hopefully plant a few seeds in terms of some skills that the team can look at and work on to move closer into the space. So that's high level the structure or the agenda, and let's see how far we get through this. I'm gonna keep time just in the corner of my eye and maybe jump through some of the slides. There's off the back too many slides, so let's just focus on the important bits, keeping an eye on the time. And as I said, let's keep it interactive. This picture I've shared with you before in a previous knowledge share, and it's probably something that you've seen maybe in a different graphic, but in the data analytics value prop, we've been talking about the modern data warehouse, and we've added some real value around the modern data warehouse specifically at our customers. And this picture previously was said, remember this picture in the sense that the old data warehouse where you write data into and that you had to beforehand design and think of all the business questions that the business might have to come up with this data warehouse design and then start writing your data sources in, is really your old EDW, your enterprise data warehouse. And it's a monolithic approach. It's that one point of the truth. The poor data team was responsible for designing and structuring and architecting that modern that data warehouse, that enterprise data warehouse. And you know, a lot of stress and failures and historical baggage within teams really lies with that one big fish. If something breaks, you know, the whole fish is sick and it impacts everything. So the modern data warehouse about 2-3 years ago was really enabled by some of the big data technologies, mainly enabled by the cloud, but it's technologies that was developed and matured by the Twitters and the Facebooks of the world. And it's very much modular, and it can just scale to something much, much bigger than your historical enterprise data warehouse. From a methodology point of view, but mainly from a technology point of view. And it's to do with tech like Hadoop, MPP, massively parallel you know, storage and file systems, highly compressible data formats such as Parquet with snappy compression. So all of those things enable the red big fish that consist out of small fishes. And that's the modern data warehouse. And I mean, we've had success in terms of assisting customers moving towards that as part of a cloud journey. But the data mesh is something more. So it's elements of this modern data warehouse, which, you know, we've had and we've been proponents of within the data and analytics value prop. But it pushes data as a product, data as an asset, much more than ever before. So let's bite into that. This is a white paper exactly actually a year ago, now March, that we as Ovations published around the traditional data warehouse that's breaking and not working anymore and not keeping up or able to keep up with the speed of business. And even in that white paper, we've highlighted some of the, at that point, fairly immature concepts around the data mesh, and we've made reference to some of the blogs, Data Monolith to Mesh, as you can see there. And it was really a lady called Zamak Degandi that founded the concept of a data mesh. And she started to evangelize it. She had 1 or 2 successful implementations, and it really picked up speed from there. And she's almost currently just touring the world physically where she can, or virtually talking about the data mesh and what it entails. And this slide just points to some mention with our modern data warehouse to the data mesh that we've published. Okay, so what is a data mesh? A data mesh tries to improve the way that business sees and handles data, not just the ability to handle the volume and the increasing variety. They call it the 4 V's within data, but to really shift the ownership of data and also to see it and talk about it as a product within a business. So there's 4 principles that a data mesh was founded on. The one is that where the data is being generated within that domain in the business, it needs to be owned. So we'll get to some detail in terms of how that contrasts against, you know, the traditional data warehouse, but you can already start to imagine that. It's also very much positioning data as a product, as you see with, you know, DevOps and the high frequency iterations that's being enabled by a software product through that. And we'll also touch on data ops, which we've also spoken about before. It's not the traditional self-serve analytics. So you all would have heard about self-serve analytics previously. To a large extent, that was a failure because it's really only applicable to a handful of really powerful power users that uses that capability where it was built and exists. And there's high investment that went into generating that capability, but it's not widely used. So this self-service is really something else, and we'll get to that. But it's around a self-serving data infrastructure that the different domains within a business can use and utilize. And obviously, to keep all of that together, it's built on a fourth principle, which is federated computational governance. Again, please, if you've got questions or if you want to shoot with something, do that while I go through this. At a high level, a data mesh is built on these four principles, and it's really to address some of the gaps that still exist, even with using big data or modern tech for small data, the fish image that we started with. Maybe it's a good point to also state this. A lot of the challenges around implementing a data mesh is actually not the technology, but it's actually, let's say, 50% technology and the platform, and the other 50% is actually things like cultural change, driving the view and the perception of data in a business, and also empowering traditional business stakeholders with, for now, the first time, the ability to take full ownership of their data, also from an analytical point of view and from a product, in quotes, point of view. So this is just a very high level timeline. Traditional enterprise data warehouse, that blue fish, the one point of the truth, and most of you would know this high-level process, external and operational data that goes through an ETL process into a data warehouse or data marts, and then from there on into a data warehouse, and then BI and reports, etc., is built on that. That changed to a data lake. Some of us in this field joke that those data lakes became data swamps very quickly, and there's specific reasons for that. But it's basically landing all your data in highly scalable storage or massively parallel readable storage in a very raw format. And then after that, to think about structuring the data and then connecting all your different analytics to that. But the difference is it was still written into relational databases. So the Ovations modern data warehouse is built around, let's say, closely a data lake concept by using slightly different tech from the big data world, but it's only applying structure to the data when you read the data. So that's sitting in between a data mesh approach, which is the bleeding edge, buzzword, and the data swamp or data lake concept that's already now, let's say, 8 years or so old from a South Africa perspective. And then, 2020 is really where AWS call it a lakehouse. There's different, words stating the same thing, but that the data mesh was really born from a principal point of view. So this is a rough timeline of how ways of storing data and having that one point of the truth evolved over time. Okay, so a bit more detail in terms of a data lake, a data mesh. The concept is all around different domains within a business, and it's served by a cross-functional team within that domain. But that team is supported by your traditional data and analytics team. But the data analytics team stops worrying about context of the data, stops worrying about data quality, stops worrying about data access. They focus on the data platform or infrastructure only, and they make sure, and they have to, that's their mandate, keep it up and running and monitor it from a storage pipeline catalog point of view, but they stop worrying about specifics around the data artifacts itself. That ownership moves to where the data is actually being generated in the business, and by using governance and standards that's agreed on within the business, and also enforced by the data team, the domain stakeholders or owners can, for the first time, build products on this infrastructure and platform that's relevant to their domain. And I mean, it makes sense because they know their domain or area in the business, division in the business the best. They understand the data and what it says, and it really makes sense for them to formalize and define the products that they see within their data, and to really make those products, build those products on the platform and make it available on this platform for other areas in the business or domains in the business to use and to consume as a data product. And that does a few things. It solves the problem currently, even with using a modern data warehouse, in terms of the lack of ownership. So who owns the data? Who's responsible, for ensuring the quality? And also, if you really want to start scaling and doing advanced analytics, etc., your poor data analytics team really becomes the bottleneck more than ever. Even if they use modern technologies in the cloud, it's still a problem. So the data mesh, as I said previously, really tries to, through this high-level concept, address those challenges and issues. Okay, I'm moving on to the next slide. And this is a little bit more practical in terms of what it looks like from an architecture point of view. So this is just an Azure example. And in Azure, it allows multiple groups or divisions within an organization to own their own piece of the platform. So each of these little groupings is potentially a domain or an area in the business, and they adhere to common standards and governance principles within this infrastructure. And again, the cloud really enables this and makes it very easy because you can deploy templates for each node, and it's almost like a turnkey switching that instance of the platform on for a different division, and for them to then really take ownership in terms of the context of the data, not the platform. That's shifts and is 100% the responsibility of your traditional data team, but that the business takes ownership of the data as an asset, and also the products that will be generated over time because of that ability to be consumed by the users. I'm not going to read through the other bullets. It gets really practical in terms of what it looks like, but this gives you a high-level picture of what it typically looks like in a potential Azure environment. And then a very important partner almost for this data mesh approach is data ops. Now, again, in the Ovations data analytics value proposition, from a methodology point of view, we've been proponents of data ops in the same light and with the same vigor almost as DevOps, in terms of a way of work and deploying and getting analytics out there to users, and not to fall back to the very traditional way. And this used to be the status quo, where you build something and after 6 months, you've got something to show that you think is, the Rolls Royce in terms of what was required. And by then the business have 10 more questions that you're not even answering, versus iterating very quickly with your users and improving and evolving your dashboard, your report, your analytics in quick iterations with the business, through a similar as DevOps, but for data specifically approach. And why data ops is a very good partner for generating momentum and for a way of work when it comes to a data mesh is it's designed. Data ops was designed to control and manage the decentralization of data. And that's exactly what a data mesh is. It's decentralizing the ownership, which gives a lot of advantages as we've touched on up to now and as we will continue to do. All right, so I think that's the first agenda point, a high-level overview of what a data mesh is, and ending with just a really good partner in terms of, actually delivering potentially a data mesh implementation through using data ops. Okay, so how does this differ from a traditional data warehouse implementation when it comes to modern data warehousing, but more specifically today, a data mesh? So again, what's really exciting for us is that businesses are moving faster than ever, and the traditional data and analytics capabilities and methodologies and technologies really could not keep up with business. And it was personally very frustrating to work on stuff, and by the time you deliver it, it's not that relevant anymore because it could not keep up with the speed of business. So all of this that we're talking about is really exciting because for the first time, it's got the potential to actually keep up with the speed of business and also even go beyond that. And by using advanced analytics, which we'll also touch on briefly within this architecture, to do very exciting predictive advanced analytics to highlight considerations that should influence decisions potentially going forward. So this is a picture. It looks, when you look at it quickly, it looks almost the same, but one big difference, as we stated in the beginning also, a data lake or a warehouse is still data coming in at the bottom from different areas in the business into, way back EDW, that blue fish, more recently into the small little red fishes, which is a data lake, modular, keeping the sources still separate, not worrying too much about structure, and then writing it into relational warehouses or marts, and then from there on delivering your reports or analytics and different users accessing that one point where all the data sits. That's on the left. A data mesh kind of breaks that, and it moves the ownership and the productization of data assets to the business itself, to almost those same potential consumers of your traditional reports. And it provides them with a platform, an infrastructure platform, as you saw earlier, that enables and empowers them to have those data products, those KPIs, well-defined, managed, quality checked, because they generate the data and they understand the data, making it available to other divisions that might use those data products, and for them to also be able to use those data products from other divisions in the business, and then to cross-platform make use of that and come up with really powerful insights. So at a high level, again, that's how the traditional differs from a data mesh approach. Practically what it looks like, these are different divisions within a typical business X, and those divisions or domains within the business are able for the first time to define and access and control their own data products and make it available through this common federated platform, data platform, to be consumed either by themselves or by other divisions in the business. And that little purple center is really the mesh, the platform, and your traditional data team that was very stressed now only have to stress about and worry about keeping the platform up and running at a high state of performance, ready to scale as the business scales, enforcing the governance and the policies, and for the ownership and the productization to shift and to be enabled to the different divisions in the business. So data product thinking is one of the big challenges in terms of getting this going and getting traction in terms of this approach. But it means it's difficult because it means to treat data as a proper asset. And companies talk about data as their new emerging asset and major differentiator, but it's not practically happening. Why? Because the stakeholders that generate the data, the line of business systems, are owned traditionally by IT, and the real deep knowledge and understanding by the business people gets lost, and they're not enabled or empowered or mandated to actually use their deep knowledge and to productize that, and to really, through the productization, basically prove that our data is really a big asset for this business. And it's being consumed by other divisions and ourselves to generate really differentiating insights. So to bring that product management discipline into data management is a big portion or a big part of a successful data mesh implementation. And it's all around that product and design thinking that would be new for a lot of those divisions or areas in the business. I'm not going to, I see we're running out of time, so I'm going to skip this slide. This is getting into more detail of how that work, that productization work. The benefits of data mesh is, I think, apparent, but let's go through them. It increases data accessibility. So this is, the biggest benefit of a data mesh architecture. By putting business owners in charge of their own data, you get higher quality, and it's leveraged more than ever before. In terms of the different analytics requirements. Improved analytics just relates to the business context really being center stage instead of just technical knowledge by your traditional data analytics team. So that's really what that highlights, and also the increase in quality in the actual data because of this approach. Customized data pipelines. So organizations are needing to differentiate with increasingly complex analytics, and the pipelines needs to be agile and change at the speed of different areas in the business. And this really embraces that and the customization for those different areas by using the same platform, but having the flexibility to customize and tweak it according to certain dynamics. Standardized data observability. I'm not going to go too deep into that. And just again, in partnership with data ops, the decreased time in analytics. Just the speed at which you can churn out answers to questions through this is very, very exciting. All right, some architectures, techniques and principles around a data mesh. This is a typical architecture blueprint for AWS and what a data mesh might look like. So you can see there it's a typical data lake account, a traditional data lake account for, let's say, the marketing division, and then also a data lake account on the left for, let's say, your finance division. And there they've got the basic building blocks that's required for a more traditional, let's call it modern data warehouse implementation, but big difference, it's only for them. And they've got ownership, they can assign rights. A key element to a success of a data mesh implementation is the data catalog. And you'll see there's a data catalog element within each domain instance, but then there's an overarching, this in the middle, central data governance account, which pulls those catalog elements across almost as a central dictionary for the business to go and look up certain data elements or products that they require, and to find it very easily and quickly. So on the left, the green can be multiple instances depending on how you decide to break down those different domains within the data mesh, and which makes sense for a specific business. The central account in AWS basically manages and enforces all the standards and governance, and is the main management point for the data team. And then your data consumers, so different users wanting to use the products or consume the analytics, can then spin up different capabilities in order to generate those analytics by consuming the products from the domains. And that can differ slightly. If it's for advanced analytics, it looks slightly different with SageMaker, for example, than just a normal flat report, which is Amazon Athena, just to do normal SQL querying through. Okay, so this is getting a bit practical. This is what it looks like in AWS from an architecture point of view. AWS recently made it really easy to, through what they call a lakehouse approach, spin up all those different data lake instances, it's actually a lake formation. It's different lake formation instances, but already in a turnkey way, turning on all these elements at the bottom without you having to do that one by one. So it's very quick to actually, keep things modular and turning extra domains or areas on as is decided. And one of the challenges is to actually decide what those domains should look like, and to not let that spin out of control. From an Azure point of view, this is, the different elements in Azure that potentially builds up a data mesh. Landing zones being those, the owners of the data where it's generated and their owned piece of the platform. And then obviously the central catalog and way of looking up and monitoring and managing the platform for the data team. I see we're out of time, but I'm gonna spend 5 more minutes and then we can open it for questions and answers. Major differences is highlighted through this table in terms of what we've touched on up to now, traditional versus the data mesh. And let's quickly go through this because this really, I think, just iterates what we've been saying up to now. So your traditional way of storing and making data centrally available with one team supporting it, multiple domains, and actually taking and having to take ownership of the data that they ingest and that's available in this one monolithic structure, to autonomous domain teams that takes ownership and productizes those nuggets of gold within their area and make it available to the rest of the business and all the advantages that comes with that. The traditional data management platform that had to manage code, data, and policies as a single unit. The code and the pipelines for that domain is managed independently and owned independently. It required separate stacks of operational analytical workloads. This is a single platform for operational and analytics workloads. What sits behind this is actually what we said previously, a bit of the big data tech that enables that. Catered to IT with little regard to business. That was, the reality for traditional data warehouse and even data lake implementations. With the data mesh, it caters to IT, but more importantly, also business and owned by business to a large extent, as we've discussed. Traditionally, centralize the platform for optimized control. It's absolutely the opposite with the data mesh. Decentralize the platform for optimized scale. And what sits behind this, again, is some of the big data tech, but more specifically microservices in the cloud. It forces domain awareness. Traditionally, the poor data team was stressing about their own understanding and context around the data. Now they can remain domain agnostic and just keep the platform up and running and at a high level of performance. The challenges, I think, is also obvious. The management around the data mesh, the decentralization of the management and the productization, all those things from a culture change point of view and how data is being perceived from a business is a challenge. I think it's easier if a business has felt the pains of a traditional approach, and that's also happening more and more. That was some of the drivers for the modern data warehouse, but I think this takes it up to a next level or a new level. The cost and risk in terms of massive existing investments into the space and now this new buzzword coming along, sounding also like a massive investment. So I think there's space around using what has been invested in. As I said, 50% is tech and 50% is actually some of those, culture and change management elements, which I think we as Ovations can differentiate on to commit to in reusing. And then cross-domain analytics in terms of an enterprise-wide data model must be defined. So those governance and standard that guides the formats of the products is also tricky to agree on and get in place. All right, wrapping up, some of the skills that is required for successful implementations around these bleeding edge approaches and methodologies when it comes to data analytics. I think it's very closely tied and remains tied to data ops. So the different roles in data ops, as we've touched on, I think previously, again, is what they call data engineers. There's a new role, data stewards, and they sit more in the business. So your traditional data analysts have a bit of a bigger role potentially going forward, sitting within a specific area in the business, have deep understanding of that business area from a business point of view, but being responsible for now the productization of those nuggets of gold in the business divisions and areas in the business. And that's what is called a data steward in this world. You still get your typical data analyst, which is more responsible for requirements gathering. So there's basically a dovetail for your traditional data analysts in terms of that role. And then obviously data scientists, which is more important specifically from a productization point of view and applying their skills to assist in the productization of those domain-specific areas enabled through the data mesh. So yeah, at a high level, I think that's a data mesh in a nutshell. I think it's very exciting. It's a little bit of an evolution on what we had, as I said in the beginning, in terms of a modern data warehouse, by pushing the ownership more closer to business and also the productization of specific areas in the business and enabling that through this data mesh platform. So I'm going to open the floor for questions. I like to, move from conceptual to practical. So I don't think there's answers for everything from a practical point of view. Even fairly advanced projects with regards to data mesh are sharing some of these challenges and are also figuring some of the detail out. But I do think it's very exciting, and where some of this is getting traction, the benefits are really apparent and big for those areas in the business. And some businesses are even gamifying the products that they generate and almost competing against each other in terms of those very valuable data products that they are able to generate through this platform and the data team that enables this data mesh platform in essence, and to push the ownership and quality of the actual data and understanding of the data a little bit back to the business themselves, which makes actually a lot of sense.